Okay, some of you actually sent me some awesome pictures for Christmas. Hey, how did you like my ring light mod? That is just absolutely the tits. Pretty awesome, huh? Some of you sent me some awesome pictures for Christmas. One was the coolest picture ever. It was a guy. I can't show you the picture because it's the dude's daughters. But he bought two D7100s. For his daughters for Christmas, and one of his daughters is sitting there in a Santa hat, looking at her camera and a big smile, and the other one's over sitting on the chair with a big smile, they're both holding their D7100. So it's like they're both near the Christmas tree, and that was awesome. That was really cool. That was the Christmas evening. Somebody, I won't mention the person, and I can't show the picture. I'm sorry about that. You can't show someone else's daughters. That was really, really awesome. Another guy, and I also can't show you because they're two kids, but a guy is like never used the Speedlight really before. He got that Voigtlander 58mm, which is just the #1 best value lens in the world, 58mm for his camera, and then he got a sync cable. It's probably a cheap one, doesn't matter, and they all work fine. And he get his flash off his camera. That dude took a picture of his two little rugrats sitting in Santa's lap. You could not have paid a professional photographer, the best in the world, to take a better picture, more rich, color-saturated, perfect light. And you couldn't have paid any pro on earth money to produce a picture better than that. Probably actually not equal to that. And so, just those two little tricks alone. Obviously, it's not about gear. I mean, gear obviously counts for something, but that Voigtlander. And then he got that rich color saturation and that depth by getting his flash off his camera. He took a picture of his two little rugrats sitting in Santa's lap, and that picture was the tits. I mean, that was, I can't show you the picture. You can't show pictures of other people's children. I love to show it to you. But obviously, hey, well, I'm glad that it's working. I mean, that's exactly the point, that it does work. And getting into Speedlight stuff is actually one of the main things for discussing for 2016, and obviously people are scared of it because they're not like fundamentally scared of like a mugger or a rapist or something. It's not that kind of fear, but it's fear nonetheless because it's hard enough to figure out what you need to do, depth of field. Consider the 5 eyes that I told you about: iris, interval, i.e. shutter, ISO, illumination. Last one, of course, is imagination, so you got the 5 eyes there in addition to these two, so you got 7 eyes to think about. But part of that illumination, obviously, is not just the illumination from the sun or ambient, but Speedlight stuff. But layering light is not really that difficult. If there's one book I could recommend, I really don't recommend any books, and I don't actually like him so much as a photographer. His photography, of course, here am I one to talk, right? But his photography is rather kind of bland. Let's just say it's not my style, but the guy has incredible skills. Even though Nikon doesn't sponsor anybody, Joe McNally is somebody that they kind of sponsor, but not openly. And so he is a Nikon's girl, but he is an expert with Speedlight use, even though I'm not a fan of his photography. See about getting a book called The Speedlight Diaries by Joe McNally, and going through that one. It's a very informative book for you. There's lots of other books out there on Speedlights. There's specifically a book called Nikon Speedlights. But they're not that difficult. Just take a scenario, for example. Say you're going to illuminate a model, and the model is standing where the camera is right now that's filming my ugly face, and the sunlight, the sun's fading, or say it's even like 6 o'clock and there's a lot of light. You want to open up the depth of field some, and you want to drop the background. But you want to add some fill, but you didn't bring your reflector. If you bring your reflector, you're limited. You're not as limited, obviously, if you just got your friggin' camera and the model. But what are you going to do? As far as light layering, and it's nothing more difficult than Legos. It's simply a matter of exposing for your background, your current ambience, and you know what your flash is going to do. So that's going to be your secondary layer. So expose, of course, your model is going to be all washed out in black. She's background lit. That doesn't matter. You expose for how you want the composition of your shot to be. Okay, now that you've got that correct, you make an adjustment, a stop or two, or one way or the other, here or there. You can either leave it the same, or you can take like 6 o'clock light in the summertime, which is still a lot of light, and dumb it down. Drop your ISO, Well, you want to keep the shutter the same. I mean, there is a point in time where you're probably going to have to add a neutral density filter, but you can get away with that in most circumstances. This is one of the big advantages of like a Fuji system, for example. You'll never need an ND filter because you can raise the shutter speed up to 1/32,000th of a second. However, not in flash photography. So that's when you're going to need to add a reflector, but that's the point for another discussion. So you're going to drop your light levels by dropping your ISO, and you don't want to necessarily increase your aperture. That's fine. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to drop your light levels, but you still want that really nice creamy bokeh background, that really shallow depth of field. So what can you do, if you don't have an ND filter? Do you have a blocker? I mean, do you have a shim? Is there any way that you can actually block the light from coming in so you can actually add the fill light but still have the shallow depth of field if you want to drop the ambient background illumination of the setting sun or the beach or whatever it is by 3, 4, 5 stops? Do you have the latitude? If there's too much light, do you actually have the latitude to be able to drop that? And it may not be the case that you do. Well, something's wrong here. I can't stand iPads. iPads are a genuine pain in the crotch sometimes. Bloody stinking iPads. People praise iPads so much. Just give me a regular computer. I'm starting to get old-fashioned. Anyway. And layering your light. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. On layering your light, I mean, it's not that difficult. Expose to your background. Add your ambience. If you've got too much light and you still want that shallow depth of field, and you've dropped your ISO, and you don't want to increase, your aperture, and you want to keep that f1.8, f2, then you're going to have to add an ND filter. You're going to have to find other options. You're going to have to block the light or add an ND filter, and then just add your fill. Add your fill off camera to the illumination. I mean, it's not that difficult. Like, there's a lot of different ways. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I mean, you keep your background light exposure and raise the subject by adding a speed light or reflector. But that is another issue. I mean, if you want to make everything even, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to keep current. I've got the fading light on the horizon, and I'm exposing at f2, and everything's fine. My shutter and my ISO. So I'm just going to add some fill light and I'm going to even everything out. Well, that's fine if that's your compositional choice, but it's not going to make your subject pop. I mean, if you make, you add your fill to match the exposure of your background, and you're just going to, even if you got the best glass in the world and, a great composition and a great pose in the model, I mean, the background and the foreground are going to mesh together. And it's good to get color saturation with the fill light, but I mean, you do want, generally speaking, a stop and a third of separation. At least I do. But I mean, that's my compositional light. Some people want everything nice and evenly illuminated. They got a perfect, and that's a perfectly valid compositional choice. But if you don't want to do that, some people get stuck doing that, and it's like they want to even everything out. That's what your camera tries to do. So you don't want to imitate your camera. You want to actually raise or lower, depending on the composition of what you want your subject to be, the exposure to that separately as a second layer of light. You don't want to even everything out, because then everything's going to mesh together, even if you got a lens with really great rendered depth. And there's perceptual depth, which is micro contrast, and rendered depth, which is lens construction. How it actually renders the lens due to binocular disparity, several other factors that make people's heads spin. So just remember to underexpose your background if necessary. If that's what you want to do, you want to drop the light, and then of course raise for your foreground, your subject. But you may not want to drop the background light. Maybe you have the perfect illumination, the sun is setting, and you've got that perfect 20 or 30 minute window there. Just add the ambient light. So layering light is not something to be afraid of. Just start thinking that way. You're always, every time you go to a shoot, it doesn't matter how good a shooter somebody is, they're always scouting the location, and if they've not been there, then they'll at least know where the sun is in location to what they're going to be shooting. So they're thinking in their heads that they want to do this composition, that composition, so they're not sitting there in the shot, fumbling like, well, what could I do? That is one thing that'll actually make your clients, roll their eyes at you, make you look like a dumbass, even if you are a good shooter, because you always have to be pre-planning in your head. Like before Nikola Tesla would actually build an invention, he'd actually build it in his brain, and then he'd actually operate the mechanism, his invention, in his brain. Some people don't have those skills to do that. Some people do, but you do need to plan as much as possible. Failure to plan is a plan to fail, as the saying goes. So You need to be planning out what your compositions are going to be, how you're going to layer your light, what sort of compositions that you want, and given where the location is going to be and the relationship of the sun, whether it's indoors or outdoors or what sort of illumination you got, how you're going to do it. Just as any good wedding photographer, if they're worth 2 cents, is going to scout the location ahead of time. And he's going to go over in his brain or her brain how the shots is going to be. He's not going to show up at the last minute unless he's just, you didn't pay him any damn money and he didn't give a damn. He has to be able to pre-plan where he's going to position himself in relationship to where everybody else is going to be, and plan for what sort of light it's going to be and what sort of time of day it is. So all that pre-planning is as important as your lens. You're layering your light, and it sounds really difficult, but it's not. It's just tedious crap that has to get done so that you can concentrate solely on the shot rather than all the little stupid crap that you need to adjust or make allowances for. And if you didn't, you come to the shoot shocked, and then you're going to sit there fumbling and you have to replan everything, and that pisses everybody off, especially your client. Even if the shots turn out great, and that's often what happens. If you sit there and fumble and you do great shots and everything turns out great, they're still pissed at you, and they don't like your work even though your work turns out perfect. And that's a big amateur mistake, even an advanced amateur, sometimes a professional. You show up and you didn't do enough pre-planning, but your shoot goes fine, the shots look great, they still hate you because people are pissy a-holes, and they end up hating you because you were fumbling at the shoot. And so never let that happen. Anyway, kind of a long video that could have been a lot shorter. Anyway, hope you got the point.